Hello, and welcome back to Podround, the podcast review show that does all the listening so you can do all the deciding. Whether you're a seasoned podcast person with 17 different feeds battling for space on your phone, or someone who's just started to wonder if there might be more to audio entertainment than true crime and cooking shows, you've found your home. I'm your host, and this is Podround. For anyone joining us for the very first time, here's what we do. Podround curates the best podcasting has to offer across different genres, different formats, and different tones, and then select some that we think are worth your precious time. We group our choices around specific topics that are driving the news agenda. In recent episodes, we've taken deep dives into the very best royal family podcasting, and we've explored the entertainment industry through the eyes of some of the sharpest commentators in the business. If you haven't caught those, they're right there waiting for you. But today, we're doing something a little different, because the subject of this episode isn't a genre, it's a person, and his name is Russell Brand. And if you're listening anywhere in the English-speaking world right now, chances are you already have some kind of opinion about him. That's rather the point. Born on the 4th of June in Grays, Essex in 1975, a working-class town east of London for those keeping geographical score, Russell Brand's life reads something like a novelist would reject for being a little too much. The only child of a single mother, Lee's experiences of sexual abuse, severe addiction to heroin and crack cocaine, spectacularised through British comedy and radio in the 2000s. With a style so wild and verbose, he seemed to exist in his own linguistic universe. Hollywood films, headline-making marriage to pop superstar Katy Perry, 3 million YouTube subscribers, a pivot to political commentary and anti-establishment activism, a public conversion to Christianity, and now a new book. And following that, a criminal trial. The book is called How to Become a Christian in 7 Days, with the subtitle, and I do love this, may take 50 years of sin and serious F-ups to get started. It's published through Tucker Carlson Books, and that too is a story. But surrounding the book tour is something far more serious. In 2023, a joint investigation by Channel 4's dispatches, The Times and The Sunday Times, this resulted in multiple women accusing Russell Brand of rape, sexual assault and emotional abuse, with allegations covering a period between 2006 and 2013. Brand has consistently and emphatically denied every allegation, stating that all his relationships were consensual. Then, in April 2025, the Crown Prosecution Service in the United Kingdom authorised the Metropolitan Police to formally charge Brand with several sexual offences relating to incidents between 1999 and 2005, and a trial has been set for October 2025. This is one of the most contested, complex and culturally loaded stories in the British public life right now. And today, Podround has found 4 podcasts that approach it from 4 entirely different angles, each one genuinely worth your time for its own distinct reasons. Let's get into it. So the first one that I've selected for us is Piers Morgan with his Uncensored channel. And now this is on YouTube, and it's recorded in the UK, but I think this one was actually recorded in New York. The show runs for about an hour 50 minutes, and Piers has many shows during the week. There is adult content in this show, and there are expletives throughout. So be prepared for explicit references to sexual history and serious criminal allegations. It certainly isn't suitable for family listening. So with this, we begin with the collision everybody was waiting for. 2 of Britain's most combustible media personalities in the same room in New York City for almost 2 hours. If you had asked Central Casting for a setup, they couldn't have done better. But before we get into the fireworks, and there are fireworks, let's talk about why Piers Morgan is worth your time as a host. Because this man's career is genuinely remarkable, and it matters to understanding why this interview works. He was appointed editor of the News of the World by Rupert Murdoch in 1994 at the age of just 28, making him one of the youngest national newspaper editors in British history. And he went on to edit the Daily Mirror for nearly a decade. He became globally recognised face through television on both sides of the Atlantic, from Britain's Got Talent to CNN's Piers Morgan Tonight. And as of 2026, he's running his own fully independent media brand, Piers Morgan Uncensored. This was built entirely on digital-first, YouTube-driven journalism, and it is thriving. This is a man who has been in rooms with Rupert Murdoch and Donald Trump, who knows exactly what the inside of British tabloid power looks like, who has seen stories killed and stories run, and who understands the machinery of narrative control at an industrial level. He brings all of that consciously and openly into this conversation, and it gives the interview a quality that is quite rare. The sense that the person doing the asking genuinely knows the territory. The format here is classic long-form, single-host interview, one chair, one guest, no panel, no distractions. Just nearly 2 hours of Piers Morgan with his notes and his sharpened pencil, and the running time alone tells you that both men came with something to say. Piers has known Russell Brand since the 2000s. He opens by noting that he's interviewed Brand for GQ in 2006 and produced what he describes as a non-stop orgy of comedy, drugs, bulimia, hookers, inner-bed romps and celebrity bed notches. He goes back to it, he reads from it, and he's not afraid to use the man's own words against him. Gently, but with precision, and watching Brand's face as those 2006 quotes land in the context of 2025 is quietly devastating. The interview covers a vast amount of ground. Piers asks Brand directly whether he can trust his own memory, given the drug use and the sheer volume of sexual encounters that defined his career. He challenges on the relationship he had with a 16-year-old that Brand discussed publicly. Legal in the UK at the time, but as Piers takes care to note, would be a crime in the state of New York from where they were broadcasting. He pushes back on Brand's vaccine skepticism, his apparent political shape-shifting from radical left to MAGA adjacent, and most pointedly of all, on whether the Christian conversion is genuine, or whether it is, to use Piers' own word, a grift. And here's the quote that defines the episode. Piers says it directly. There are people who think you're basically just a massive grifter. You're very smart, you're very eloquent, but actually when it comes to any of these issues, you just don't really have a personal principle. Brand's response runs to several eloquent minutes and involves references to the Chomsky theory of institutional conditioning, Machiavelli, the COVID pandemic, deep state intelligence operations, and the nature of decentralized media, which might tell you everything you need to know about the particular way Russell Brand answers a question. And then comes the moment the internet cannot stop talking about. Piers asks whether the Bible Brand has brought into the studio to his interview with him is the one he carried into his court appearances. Brand confirms it is, and Piers asks him to find and read the passage that was significant to him on the day. And what follows is perhaps the most riveting single minute of podcast television you'll find this year. Brand leafing backwards and forwards through the pages, muttering to himself, unable to locate the verse, while Piers stares directly down the barrel of the camera with an expression that communicates approximately 10,000 words. Brand eventually settles on Isaiah 12. I will praise you, Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. He ended up selecting a substitute that fell flat. Now, this is a UK-produced show, globally available on YouTube, publishing multiple times a week, which means if you enjoyed this episode, there is a back catalogue that will keep you busy for a long time. Because it runs to nearly 2 hours, it's a save for the weekend listen rather than a commute, but it's worth every minute. If you want confrontational journalism conducted by someone who genuinely knows the landscape, this is where you start. And my one-line summary for this is Piers Morgan brings 20 years of media experience and a healthy skepticism to bear on Russell Brand, and the result is unmissable. Now, if Piers Morgan represents the established media world, albeit a ferociously independent digital version of it, turning its full critical force onto Brand, our next podcast comes from somewhere rather more combustible. Piers is confrontational but measured. He's probing, but ultimately he gives Brand some room to breathe. Our next host has no such inclination. She's American, she's based in New York, she has strong opinions about Russell Brand, about Christianity, about the fashion industry, and about Megyn Markle, frequently in the same episode. And her show is called The Nerve. So let's start, as always, with the host, because Maureen Callahan's credentials are central to why this review matters. She began writing professionally at 17, working for Sassy magazine and MTV. She went on to serve as an editor and writer at New York magazine and Spin, and as a critic at large for the New York Post. But it is her books that tell you most clearly what kind of journalist she is. In 2019, she published American Predator, a New York Times bestseller examining what she calls the most meticulous serial killer of the 21st century. And in 2024, she followed it with Ask Not, another Times bestseller, this one a forensic examination of the Kennedy family and the women they destroyed. Maureen Callahan has spent her career investigating powerful men and documenting the damage they leave behind. When she turns her attention to Russell Brand, she's not approaching the subject without context. She has, in the most literal professional sense, been here before. The Nerve is a magazine format show, broad in scope, multi-topic, and very much driven by Callahan's voice and sensibility. This particular episode covers the Russell Brand story in its first third, before pivoting to the Met Gala and then to a rich segment with Lady Colin Campbell, who's a royal biographer about King Charles's US state visit and the ongoing Sussex situation. It is, in other words, a show that treats its audience to many compelling storylines. Think of it as the smartest magazine you've ever read, but one where the editor occasionally loses patience and says exactly what she thinks in a way no magazine editor could ever print. Her take on Brand is sharp, sardonic, and entertainingly uncharitable about his religious conversion. As a veteran of 12 years in Catholic school, she wastes no time. She says people who go hard into Christianity and are the loudest about it, about what a Christian they are and how saved they are, they're the biggest phonies of all. A real, like anyone of faith, really. You don't have to say it, you see it in their actions. Her antenna, she informs us, is way the up and stays there throughout. What makes Callahan's appraisal of Brand genuinely outstanding is her methodical construction of a forensic record. She plays clips from the Australian 60 Minutes interview with one of Brand's accusers. She plays excerpts from the Channel 4 documentary. She reads directly from the Times joint investigation and pauses to note, with the authority of someone who writes for a UK publication, that British defamation law is extraordinarily stringent. When a British national publication runs a story like this, she explains, it has been lawyered comprehensively. The bar is not the same as it is in the United States. She also reads from text messages between Brand and one of his alleged victims. When a girl says no, it means no. And Brand's reply, I'm sorry, you didn't need to get tested. I will make this up to you somehow with love and kindness, not my original idea, which was more sex. Callahan's response to that line is characteristically brief and precise. What are you worried? Sorry about Russell. Her segment on the Piers Morgan Bible moment is equally sharp. She starts a clock on how long it takes Brand to find the passage and builds a running commentary that is both funny and pointed. Her conclusion, he's on trial for his life, don't believe this guy. It's worth noting that this show publishes multiple times per week, including a Saturday mini episode exclusively on YouTube, plus a Substack newsletter with bonus content for subscribers. If you enjoy Callahan's voice, which I really do, and because she's so funny, there is an enormous amount of material to explore. The Nerve is a generalist show with strong perspective and an enormous range. But when it locks onto a story, it does not let go easily. And what it offers is that genuinely distinctive combination of investigative credibility and pure entertainment. This is not a show that lectures. It's a show that is very much enjoying itself, even while it takes evidence very seriously. So my one-line summary for this show is Maureen Callahan brings a crime writer's precision and a New Yorker's absolute impatience to the Brand story, and the result is as entertaining as it is exacting. So we've had confrontational British journalists pushing Brand directly. We've had the New York investigative commentator building a forensic record from the evidence. Both brought heat. Both brought journalism. But our third podcast brings something entirely different. And it may be, for many of you, the most revealing listen in today's lineup. Because what if, instead of watching the Bible moment and going, this looks suspicious, or this seems weird, you found yourself thinking, I wonder what a psychiatrist would make of that. If that thought has ever occurred to you, then our next show is a gift. This is Shrinking the World with Dr. Raj Persaud. Here is the podcast in today's lineup that has the shortest running time and I would argue the highest density of insight per minute. 35 minutes. That's a long commute or a brisk walk, and by the end of it, you will not look at the original Piers Morgan interview in the same way again. The host is Dr. Raj Persaud, and his biography commands serious attention. He's a consultant psychiatrist who has held positions at the Bethlehem Royal and Maudsley NHS hospitals in London, the Institute of Psychiatry, the Institute of Neurology at University College London, and Johns Hopkins Hospital in the United States. He was the resident psychiatrist on the ITV daytime programme This Morning. He has written regularly for the Daily Telegraph, The Independent and Cosmopolitan, and has hosted psychology programming on BBC Radio 4 and the BBC World Service. He's a joint editor of the Royal College of Psychiatrists Discovery podcast series. This is someone operating at the very top of his profession. The format here is solo presentation, one host, no guests, no panel, speaking directly to camera and to the listener. Dr. Persaud walks us through the Piers Morgan interview from a psychiatric perspective, using the Bible moment as his central exhibit, but radiating outwards to examine Brand's behaviour throughout the entire conversation. He opens by noting that he intends to talk about an aspect of the video that no one else has discussed, and that he believes reveals more about what is happening in Brand's psychology than the Bible-leafing spectacle itself. He identifies 4 possible explanations for what occurred. First, manipulation. The grifter hypothesis that Piers Morgan raises explicitly, the idea that this is all performance. Second, honest error. He genuinely read a passage, he genuinely cannot find it now, and there is nothing more sinister to it. Third, something psychotic. And Dr. Persaud handles this possibility with care, not diagnosing Brand, but noting that the length of time, the muttering, the apparent obliviousness to how strange the moment was playing are behaviours that, in a clinical context, would prompt psychiatrists to ask questions. Fourth, and this is the one that lands most compellingly, passive aggression. The idea that by this point in the interview, Brand was unconsciously annoyed with Piers, and that the extended, fruitless page-turning was a form of dominance assertion, making the interviewer wait, reclaiming a sense of control in what had been an uncomfortable 90 minutes. But the true heart of the analysis is not about the page-turning at all. It's about what Brand did not do. Dr. Persaud notes, it's not the length of time he took, which is a bit weird. It's actually the fact that he's oblivious to the fact he's taking a long time. And everyone's thinking, what on earth is going on? He's very wrapped in himself. He did not say, I know I'm taking forever, I'm so sorry. He did not offer, when the passage proved unfindable, to email it to Piers afterwards. He did not acknowledge the audience's experience of sitting with him throughout the discomfort. And then Dr. Persaud makes the connection that gives the episode its real power. One of the reasons people end up in trouble with the law, and they're a bit boorish and maybe sexual predators, maybe found guilty later of sexual assault, is little awareness of how they're coming over, and a certain selfishness and self-preoccupation. For a man attempting to demonstrate that he's a changed person, the absence of that awareness is, Dr. Persaud suggests, not a small thing. He also notices something that no journalist in the media cycle appears to have flagged. The very opening seconds of the interview, before the cameras are officially rolling, when Brand reaches out and physically touches Piers without asking permission. It's a brief moment, but Dr. Persaud identifies it as meaningful. A man who still does not pause to check before crossing a physical boundary. In the context of the charges Brand faces, this is a pointed observation. This is the most snackable podcast in today's lineup by some distance. 35 minutes, solo presenter, laser focused on one specific event and its implications. It's also the cleanest in terms of content, making it the most accessible for a wider range of listeners. It comes from the United Kingdom, it publishes based on subject matter rather than on schedule, and it rewards close listening. Dr. Persaud does not tell you what to think about Russell Brand. He provides the analytical tools, applies them methodically, and lets you draw your own conclusions. My one-line summary for this one is Dr. Raj Persaud watches the Brand Morgan interview and sees not a media moment but a diagnostic case study, and his findings will change how you watch the original clip. 3 podcasts in, and here's where we have landed. We have had the confrontation, we've had the investigation, and we've had the clinical analysis, each brilliant in its own way, each approaching Brand from the outside looking in. But in our final podcast today, we take a different path entirely, because the interview that in many ways set off this entire media cycle, the clip that Piers Morgan played in his own show, the one that generated the headlines, came from our 4th podcast. This is the interview that preceded everything else. This one was warmer, longer, and in some ways more revealing than any of the others. This is The Megyn Kelly Show. The Megyn Kelly Show publishes every day. That alone is extraordinary, and it tells you something about the scale of the operation Kelly has built since going independent. The show runs on SiriusXM and on YouTube. It won an iHeartRadio Podcast Award in 2025, and it consistently ranks amongst the most listened to programs in American independent media. 2 hours and 20 minutes for this particular episode, and very little of it is wasted. The host, as host bios go, is genuine standout. Megyn Kelly trained as a corporate litigator, practicing law for 9 years before pivoting to journalism at Fox News in 2004. She rose to host America Live and The Kelly File, becoming nationally known for questioning Karl Rove with piercing directness on election night in 2012, and for the challenging questions that she put to Donald Trump at the 2015 Republican primary debate. She moved to NBC in 2017 before the network cancelled her morning show in 2018 following a controversy. Then she rebuilt her entire operation from the ground up, being Devil May Care Media, launching the Megyn Kelly Show as its own independent entity, and in 2025 expanding further with MK Media as a full network for independent creators. She's a lawyer, she's a broadcaster, and she is, as this interview demonstrates repeatedly, one of the most forensically prepared interviewers working in American podcasting. That legal training really shows. What makes the Megyn Kelly interview distinct from everything else in today's lineup, and this distinction is important when you're deciding what to listen to, is warmth, not softness, warmth. These two have history. Kelly met Brand when he appeared on her NBC show years ago, and she opens this interview by describing being charmed by him then. She calls him so warm, so nice, and one of my favourite celebrities I met at Fox or NBC. But then she does something rare. She tells him that when the 2023 allegations surfaced, she was angry with him, that she told her audience the conservative movement did not need someone like that. She admits she believed there was enough evidence to be concerned, and then, and this is where the interview becomes genuinely extraordinary, she tells him that she's reconsidered, having watched what governments and media institutions have done to commentators who hold certain political positions. She says she is now, and I quote, enormously open-minded to you being railroaded and attacked by people for reasons having nothing to do with actual facts, but with your right-leaning stance on certain issues. End quote. That admission opens a door that stays open for the rest of the conversation, and what comes through it is remarkable. The section on Brand's childhood, the absent father, the mother who survived cancer multiple times, the sexual abuse he experienced at age 7 and again as a teenager, is handled with genuine sensitivity by Kelly. And Brand, freed from the defensive crouch he adopts under Piers Morgan's direct interrogation, is more open here than anywhere else about his own complicity in the behaviour that has brought him to where he is today. On the sex addiction, he is disarmingly honest. He says, what fame gave me and what addiction fueled was opportunity for endless consent, which led me to be a hedonist and a fool and an exploiter of women, and that is wrong. End quote. Kelly reads directly from Brand's book. The passages about multiple women simultaneously, about the hollow sadness that accompanies all forms of addiction and sin, about the life he now sees as a profound misuse of gifts he could have used differently. She identifies the parallel between sexual addiction and drug addiction, the downside of shame and self-disgust, and never being able to feel what you're trying to feel. And her response is the response of someone who's thought carefully about addiction and human psychology, not just someone moving through prepared questions. But the emotional weight of the episode lives in its closing passages, where Kelly, with real care, asks Brand what it would mean if he goes to prison for crimes he says he did not commit. His answer, grounded in his faith, his acceptance of whatever comes, is direct, and I quote, "If it is God's plan, then there's no point resisting it. I will serve him there." End quote. Whether you believe him or not, it's not a nothing statement. This is a daily show from the United States. It's available across YouTube, SiriusXM, and the consistency of output is one of the things that makes Kelly's operations so impressive. If you want the widest possible portrait of who Russell Brand is right now, not just what he's accused of or what he claims to be, how he speaks about his past or how he frames the trial ahead, and what his relationship with his faith actually looks like in conversation. This is the most complete single listen available. It is long. Save it for a long drive or a slow Sunday, or split across a couple of sessions, but it is worth it. My one-line summary for this is the Megyn Kelly Show offers the most intimate, wide-ranging, and ultimately human portrait of Russell Brand in circulation. A lawyer interviewing a man facing the biggest trial of his life, and both of them knowing exactly what's at stake. And that, friends, is this week's Podround. 4 podcasts, 4 angles, one impossibly complicated, deeply serious, genuinely fascinating story. Let's do a quick recap for anyone taking notes. Podcast 1 is Piers Morgan Uncensored. YouTube, approximately 1 hour and 50 minutes of direct, confrontational, expert-level interrogation from a British media veteran who's known Brand for 20 years and was not going to let that stop him pushing. Adult content throughout, publishes multiple times a week. A global show, born in the UK, save this one for a long weekend session. It's essential. Podcast 2 was The Nerve with Maureen Callahan, a YouTube and Substack, a magazine format American show with multiple segments per episode. Russell Brand takes up the first 33 minutes of a 90-minute run. Forensic, funny, and entirely without sentimentality, adult content throughout, and publishes multiple times per week from the United States with a Substack newsletter for subscribers. A brilliant discovery if you don't already know it. Podcast 3 is Shrinking the World with Dr. Raj Persaud. Approximately 35 minutes, a solo presenter, and he's a Harley Street psychiatrist applying clinical tools to the Brand Morgan interview, and he finds things that no journalist has flagged. The cleanest in terms of language of the 4 today, published from the United Kingdom on a schedule driven by subject matter rather than a calendar. The most snackable in today's lineup and possibly the most revelatory. Podcast 4, The Megyn Kelly Show, which is on YouTube and SiriusXM. Approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes, a daily American show that is one of the most significant operations in independent media. Adult content throughout, the warmest and most wide-ranging of the 4, offering the fullest portrait of Brand himself. The one to go to when you want to understand not just what he's accused of, but who he is. Now, before we go, I want to hear from you. Podround exists because there is an almost infinite amount of great audio and video out there on demand. And the only way I can find the best of it is with your help. If there's a podcast you think deserves the Podround treatment in any genre, on any subject, whether it's sport, politics, true crime, royals, health, history, culture, or anything in between, please get in touch. Tell me what you're listening to. Tell me what you think is brilliant and overlooked. Previous Podround episodes have featured the best in royal family podcasting in existence and some of the sharpest entertainment industry commentary that you'll find anywhere. But there's so much more out there, and your suggestions shape the series. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like, hit subscribe, and if you feel so moved, leave a review. Tell a friend, tell a fellow podcast listener. Share this episode with someone who's spent the last week hearing about Russell Brand and doesn't know where to start. Podround is here to answer exactly that question. Until next time, keep listening to the good stuff, and we'll try to help you find it.